And good evening, everybody. Again, for the record, I am Mike Sable. I work for the city of Maplewood. I am your host and facilitator of tonight's session. This is Task Force meeting number 6. We will have been together for 12 hours by the time that we're done tonight, and made a lot of really good progress. Again, similar pattern as before. I will call people in advance so you can introduce yourself. One, to offer up just some perspective on who you are and what you're up to, and then also as an audio test. And so Jim, Marge, and Melinda, if you would kick us off. Jim, tell us what's happened the last 2 weeks in your life, and we'll test your audio too.
Well, good evening, Jim Beardsley from Friends of Maplewood Nature. Actually been kind of quiet. Thanksgiving was very quiet. I unfortunately did not get a chance to use my new camera. When I got it, it was defective. I had to send it back to get it repaired, and so it's on its way back.
Oh no. Oh. Well, maybe next time.
Well, it's a brand new technology, so these things are expected sometimes.
Okay. Well, stay with it. Your audio sounds good. Marge, then Melinda, then Audra, please.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Yeah, pretty quiet Thanksgiving. I want to just report in the tree board in Oakdale. Our tree truck is off the ground, and we're working on the brochure, but the signs are out there. So if anybody wants to take a walk through the Discovery or Oakdale Park by the Discovery Center, you can see kind of a prototype of what's going to come to the Maplewood Nature Center.
Cool. Thank you. Audio is great. Melinda, Audra, then Martha, please.
Good evening, everybody. Last couple of weeks have been pretty quiet. Quiet Thanksgiving. Did enjoy the nice weather that we had, especially that Saturday after Thanksgiving. We were able to have a bonfire next to White Bear Lake, and with another couple, socially distanced, of course. And so that was nice. So other than that, it's just doing some outside chores, getting them wrapped up, and getting ready to move inside for Christmas.
Good, thank you. Audra, Martha, and then Liz.
Good evening, everybody. It's Audra Robbins, Parks and Recreation Manager. And similar story for my Thanksgiving. We did sneak down to Crosby Farm Park on Thanksgiving Day to run off some energy between food and then pie later, and we were able to go. It was peaceful and just lovely down there, even in the winter. So it's become one of our favorite places to go. And then letting you know, I was out at the Nature Center walking all the trails today. I met with the contractor that's gonna be working on the bridges and the stairs and the observation deck, and it was a beautiful day out there. So it was perfect for right before this meeting.
Cool. Good. Thank you. Martha, then Liz, then Kathy, please.
Hi. Gosh, yeah, not much going on. I worked really hard to not work over the Thanksgiving break, and you know, got out a puzzle and things that we would normally do when we go to, visit family over Thanksgiving, to mimic it as much as possible.
Good. Thank you. Liz, then Kathy, then Joe Sheeran.
Hi, I'm Liz. We also have been enjoying the weather outside and going outside, and maybe the lack of snow, I guess, right? We had a bonfire as well in the last couple of weeks, couple of those, to get up all those twigs, finished our leaves, all those really great Minnesota chores, but it's been really nice to be able to do those still into December.
Good. Thank you. Kathy, then Joe, and then Jan, please.
Hi, we had a nice Thanksgiving with a neighbor. She's part of our bubble. We've been doing things together since February when she had a knee replaced. So we have a small bubble, but we had a very lovely Thanksgiving, and I'm glad it's winter almost so that I can forget about the doggone yard chores. I went out and made one last pass and buy grab. If any more things show up, I'm going to ignore them. I'm going to pretend it's already snowed.
Good. Thanks, Kathy. Your audio sounds good. Joe Sheeran, Jan, and then Marcy, please.
How you doing? Yeah, same as everybody else. Just trying to avoid people and cooking a bird and that sort of stuff. So it's been good to see everybody tonight.
Good. Thank you, Joe. Audio is good. Video was a little bit less, but that's okay. We can still hear you good. Jan, and then Marcy, please.
Hi, everyone. We had a pretty quiet Thanksgiving at home, just the two of us, but we welcomed a new baby boy into our family. My daughter had a baby on the day before Thanksgiving. So lots of communication by FaceTime. So that was been great. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. That's great news. Marcy, if you would, please.
Hello, everyone. I had a pretty quiet Thanksgiving as well. I actually ordered an organic turkey like 3 weeks ago from the farm in Cannon Falls. And when I went to pick it up at Kowalski's, they didn't have my order. So it was 5 o'clock on Wednesday, and the guy was so sweet and said, well, we don't have that one, but would you take one of ours? And we won't charge you for it. And I went, okay, great, thank you. And then he looked around and he said, well, it looks like all we have left are 18-pounders.
Oh.
And I didn't have the heart to tell him it was just me and my 2 cats.
Oh.
So
the cats ate well.
We had a great feast.
I bet. You're probably still eating it and could forever.
Well, I'm freezing it, so yeah. Good.
Well, good evening, everybody. And I really appreciate everybody sharing and getting right. We know each other now. We're friends at this point. We've spent so much time together. So as a typical process, I will share my screen periodically. Again, our goal tonight is to kind of work through some of the recommendations that have come forward. We'll talk through how we want to incorporate resident survey data, how we want to use that information, how we want to get that information. We also want to start to talk about how we want to present the findings to the City Council. It's one of the requirements, and let's talk about kind of the best process for presenting information. And then I think the last thing is just sort of cleaning up the recommendations, making sure that they flow correctly, that the most important ones rise to the top. And so we will kind of work through that. I will share my screen just so we can, sorry, I had to find my mouse. We'll go through what the agenda looks like. Everybody had a chance to see it, but can everybody see my screen okay? So we will kind of go through the review, the November 19th meeting summary. As you recall, that was a lot of gathering of recommendations. And again, those areas of discussion were around physical asset, the best use of the site and the building, partnerships, service levels and business model, financial investments, capital and operational. We got through 4 of the 6, but doesn't mean we can't certainly add to the other ones. What we had left were environmental education and volunteer coordination and support. Again, as a reminder, in terms of thinking about timing, we had short-term, medium-term, and long-term. We have this sort of next meeting topic / agenda. I put that on there because it seems like we might have a need for an additional session if we want to incorporate some feedback from residents in our survey. Any questions on sort of where we're at with that piece? And I'm working in a slightly different format, so I'm gonna stop sharing and go to there. Open up to the group. Do they have any questions about sort of where we are at and what we hope to accomplish tonight? Jan, go ahead. You have to unmute, but I appreciate you waving. There we go.
Okay. I had a question about the timeline. 6 months, 18 months, and 3 years. And I wondered, you know, is there a reason for that? It seems to me that that's kind of really a long timeline, that if you had, like, say there was a commission or another group working on it, it just seems like that goals are just out so far. And I wondered too about the Nature Center's master plan that was approved last year. And it seems to me that that was 6 and 12 and 18 months. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can respond to that. So that's my main question.
Sure. I think that I'll answer the question, and then Melinda and Audra can correct me if I get anything wrong. But the timing wise, part of it is there's no allocated budget in 2021 to operate the Nature Center. And so the staff that are remaining are Audra, and then the Natural Resources Coordinator, Carol Gurnis, are the only two staff who are sort of, quote, dedicated to the operation. And so what they can't do is do a lot of the preparation work for how it might launch in 2022. Because the current city council budget doesn't have operating money for programming. It does have operating money for maintaining the grounds and the facilities, but not for operating programming. And so the thinking on the timeline is the short term is, how do you prepare something that helps you launch in 2022 January? That was the thinking on the timing. And Audra and Melinda, do you want to maybe add in or offer something I missed?
I will say that sounds exactly right. And then even in the master plan, there were short and long-term goals, but there was also for, even with the facility, with the improvements to the building and adding and those kind of things, some of those were 5 years or more out. So it was very spread out. There was the short, medium, long-term, and then way out in the future goal, because it was meant to be a 20-year plan. So it was just focusing on the Nature Center through the next 20 years. So I don't know if that adds anything to the conversation.
And I had a follow-up question too, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
Don't mean to cut off Melinda if she wanted to say something though. No, okay. This idea of having a Nature Center commission, if adopted, at least to me, it sounds like it would be a great way for citizens to supplement what the staff can do. But also, I just kind of wondered, I'm not so familiar with what, like, say, for instance, the ENR committee does, and how maybe the duties and the way that the ENR committee operates, the responsibilities, how that might inform what a Nature Center committee might do, what kind of responsibilities or what kind of tasks they might be able to take on.
Thank you for that question. I'm going to do one thing first. Becca just jumped on the call. Becca, if you can hear me, just unmute, say hello, so we can make sure that your audio and video works.
Hello.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Good, thank you. Go back to it. So the concept or the idea of having a committee or a commission appointed specific to the Nature Center came up last time. Audra, do you want to share how ENR works? I know it's not your area, but I know that you know how it works. And so kind of walk through the logistics of operating.
Yeah, and my understanding, Jan, would be this commission wouldn't, I mean, I guess everything's possible. Instead of a formal commission, the Parks and Recreation Commission, like, if I can speak to that first, might, oversees all of Parks and Recreation functions, and the Nature Center was included in that, and they have been involved in decisions, so they would be a commission that could guide this group as well. And the ENR, they work on not only environmental issues and education, but they're tied to some of the things that the Parks and Rec Commission does. They deal with things that come up with ordinances and all those kinds of things to make sure that we're following regulations and doing what we need to do. So I think both commissions could actually be a guiding force for this commission if that's the route the group wanted to go. But I think it would be both groups together that could be facilitate a task. I don't know if it would be a task force or a commission, whatever it was called, going forward.
Melinda, do you want to add anything to that?
The only thing that I would add is I would just agree with Audra that there's probably 2 commissions that can already function to help work through any proposals or anything that any programming that we want to do. To create another commission would be pretty onerous for us. We just don't have the staff. We already have people like Audra and other staff that are attending 2 or 3 night meetings a month besides council meetings. And it also requires being cablecast and streamed on our webpage, which has a pretty hefty price tag. So instead of putting money there, I would see that it could be spent somewhere else, and we could probably get the same result with some committees from this group working with the Park and Rec and ENR.
And for the folks who don't know all of the acronyms, Environmental and Natural Resources Commission is a group. We just shorten it to ENR. Kathy Juneman, your hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I kind of am mirroring Audra, really, and Melinda, I guess. It was never my thought when we were discussing it that we would try to create another commission. First of all, commissions can get onerous. And I was thinking of a task force / committee, and maybe committee is a better term,
Yeah,
to go forth and work on the possibility of what we talked earlier about collaboration and ongoing funding. There's a lot to be looked at, and there were people on this committee that you are part of that said they might be willing to continue working on that. And so they would have to be meeting among themselves and probably with Mike and possibly Audra to decide what those duties might look like. But then certainly for anything that needed to have commission input, it would be the ENR and the Parks Commission, depending on what it is. Programming more likely from the Parks Commission. Anything about the environmental education that involves preservation of any kind would have to go to the ENR, and the ENR they're very enthused about the education piece, very much so. That's kind of why they think they're there, actually. A lot of it's educating the public at large, but it can also include programming. So both of those could be very closely involved, but I was thinking more of some kind of a committee of people after the fact, perhaps from this, that would help us with how we're going to move forward with the whole idea of collaboration and funding and so on. We can't just drop that. We have to have some kind of a structure in mind.
Okay.
But I know the council wouldn't go for another commission, and it wouldn't do anything anyway.
Jan, if you want to respond, and then Jim.
You know, to me, whether it's a committee or a task force, it doesn't really matter too much. I can see where a commission would be a lot more staff input and so forth. If it was a task force that was dedicated to these goals, and that would be great. That's exactly what I wanted to know. Great, thank you.
Jim, go ahead.
Well, since I brought up the idea, I didn't think of it being a commission. I thought of it being just a committee. Right. Just an extension of this task force to get some of the work done, because I don't see how any work is going to get done. No offense to the staff. You guys are worked to the bone the way it is to add more work to you. And so maybe a committee could get things done a little faster and a little more timely manner than relying on staff to try to do everything.
Okay.
Hear, hear. Councilmember Juneman says yes.
I appreciate folks weighing in. As things pop up in the chat, I'll share them. Liz did mention agreed. I would be more than happy to do legwork. So I appreciate that, and we will do outreach to everybody. I think I think we all understand this is a pretty heavy lift, and so I appreciate everybody willing to step up and kick in and do some more work. So any other questions related to where we're at? I'm gonna jump over to, sorry. I'm gonna share my screen. This is a document that will look familiar to many of you. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm working at a different spot, so I'm out of habit, so I apologize if it's a little bit cumbersome. We did do, as you know, we went through the developing recommendations of the physical asset, short-term, some long-term. One of the things that happened, we've talked at the staff level about how do we potentially put our staff inside to open up the building periodically. That's something that we are very serious about looking to do. The challenge of the governor's most recent order, I don't think it complicates our ability to operate and to put folks into the building. It does kind of mess with our warming houses for a little bit, but that's a different problem for this group. But what I wanted to do is kind of go through, again, we've made recommendations, short, medium, and long. What we haven't done is talked about environmental education. And Marge did offer some comments, and Becca, I was able to get yours incorporated as well. And I've tried to capture people's comments as they've come in. But in this sort of category of environmental education, Marge made a comment about medium term. Is there an opportunity to sell the curriculum that has already been developed to other nature centers, to homeschoolers, to educators, and in general? Could units literally be sold online? You've made purchases yourself. Do you want to share a little bit about kind of your experience with this and what you think might be some of the benefits to this environmental education approach?
Sure. Yeah. So the one that I have purchased online is it's actually a monarch and milkweed kind of book. Maybe it's called the textbook. I don't know, but I purchased it online. It's all digital, and they committed to sending us updates when they work on their materials. And in fact, I just got an update, which made me think about that there is opportunity to make money online selling things. And if you look at Etsy or all these places where people are selling things that are of value to other organizations, and maybe there's a way to make some money here if indeed there are. Sounds like a lot of work has gone into programming that, for example, Oakdale doesn't have. Is there an opportunity to, if we don't collaborate, to sell it to other organizations? There we go. Martha's got some comments in here.
Yeah. There are sites like Teachers Pay Teachers that might be an appropriate place for that type of option. I'm sure lessons plans can be traded back and forth across the internet at a low price. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Can I just comment, especially now with COVID, it just seems like this is like the perfect opportunity to say, we have material for you, for those schools and organizations that don't have curriculum and they can't get to it. They can't actually do the outreach right now. And we may be missing that window, but who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's my 2 cents on that.
I appreciate that. Marcy, I want to give you an opportunity to weigh in because I know that this is right in your wheelhouse. How do you think about something like this? And what are your thoughts around environmental education?
Well, remind me, were you charging for school groups before?
Yes, they were, but a nominal fee per child.
Okay.
Just a tiny.
Okay. Well, that's the thing about environmental education. It's like any other education. It's not a moneymaker necessarily in terms of maintaining all the expenses that are necessary for it. But that having been said, I think I guess what I want to say is this is a little bit of a personal story from Tamarack. But when we built the Discovery Hollow play area, we were really afraid that nobody would want to come to us for programs anymore. And that would mean, you know, the end of our program staff, basically. But the opposite happened. And so I guess my advice would be, the more you can, you know, get people to go to the physical site, then the more opportunities you'll have for people to say, hey, I want that. And also, I mean, marketing in the sense of knowing who your audience is, or tapping into what who you want your main audience to be, and really developing that to the fullest extent. It may be school groups, although school groups are problematic, just in terms of scale and the number of kids you need to do it. We've already talked about, you know, summer camp and that kind of thing, depending upon, you know, how much space you can and should have for something like that.
Mhm.
So I will go. I'll go back to, and also summer camp, I told you before, is our cash cow in terms of our budget. So yeah.
Good, thank you. Martha, go ahead.
I was just reminded when she was talking about, you know, school groups on site can be difficult, and we have talked about the Maplewood Nature Center, the size being problematic for spacing of large groups. And I just thought one of the recommendations maybe should be along the lines of what we talked about before, having some sort of vehicle and or storage space that would make it easy to do visiting field trips, or I can't think of the term that is usually used, but where a naturalist or whoever's providing the program could take the materials and go to the school building. Because I know that for schools that can be easier because it's easier on the budget without having to do busing and those types of things. And then the spacing often can work out better too.
I appreciate that. I'm gonna add that into the, excuse me, drop my pen. I'm gonna add that as people share things, I'll continue to add things into the recommendation box. In fact, I'll do that now while we're talking. So I will scroll up to sort of the business model piece, and this is, I'll just add it under the short term because it's a you know, something that can be done reasonably quickly though. There we go.
You know, I'd like to add something to what Martha said. There's a concept that's been roaming around in my head for a while. And it has to do with, you know, all the child care centers that are out there, and some of them are private. Most of them are actually private. Most of them operate on a shoestring. But a lot of them still have a chain link fence, pea gravel surfaces, you know, some plastic swings or whatever. It's basic kind of stuff in their outdoor area. And so I have wanted for a long time to have a van that loads up, you know, tree cookies and branches and sticks and planks and pine cones and whatever else, to take them to those playgrounds and do some sort of outreach that way. I don't know if there's any money in that, but it sure would be a great asset and enhancement to those especially urban
Mhm.
places.
Thank you, Marcy. So I want to go back to the environmental education piece for some of the short-term and kind of medium-term ideas. Another one that Marge shared, which was more of a, well, I'll save it because it's volunteer coordination, but other recommendations are thinking short-term and medium-term and long-term around environmental education. Things folks have thought about or recommendations that you would want to make sure get captured. Go ahead, Marge.
Sure. I had another question, I guess it was really if environmental education, we had already talked about partnerships earlier, number 2, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If this isn't like a subset of that, because a lot of those partnerships were with schools and educators. So I was struggling a little bit about the overlap or not, should they be separate or should they be combined? Thanks.
Well, I think that's a really good question. Kathy Juniman, you have your hand raised.
I'm thinking they could be separate, but we also can make reference in each one that they basically tie together. Because I think there are some things that are native to the environmental education piece, but there are lots of others that would tie. So I guess if we keep them separate, we can also say, see section 2, or that we acknowledge that there's overlap and they tie together. I just think that's a possibility. The other thing I wanted to add was possibly we need to be a little more, I guess the word is pushy, with getting ourselves out there to be part of community ed, because Nature Center used to offer a variety of adult programs. And I think a lot of the community that wasn't just focused on the Nature Center didn't know that. And people do pick up that community ed booklet when it comes. I mean, I even have older neighbors who say, did you see they're doing blah, blah, blah. I mean, people still look at it. And so if nothing else, it's oh, yes, that's a nature program.
Mm-hmm.
I just think there's a place for, if we're looking for exposure and we're looking for a way to get people's attention, that's another way to do it.
I would also, oh, sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
Environmental education is just it's just a huge thing. Again, if there's a way, I know that you guys had great success with the rain garden stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If we could, again, kind of narrow it down or think of a target audience or a target concept, whatever it is, to do really, really well and be known for that, and then start adding things to that as you can. So there, I mean, the rain gardens, there's so much more in there in terms of environmental education than just how to build a rain garden.
Right.
So using maybe that as the nucleus that spreads out in lots of different directions.
Thank you. Jim, Martha, and then I think I heard Kathy.
Well, continuing on with this topic, one of the things the Nature Center used to sponsor were something like community ed classes. They had native trees and shrubs, native perennials and things like that were open to the public. Mm-hmm. And whatever that stopped, and I'm surprised that stopped because there was usually a pretty good crowd for those types of things. So we need to go back and look at what program material is there and see if we can revise some of those.
Good idea.
Because I know the native plant material one, they actually had some native plant materials you could order, and then you pick them up at the Nature Center and
mm-hmm.
put them in your garden. And I got my native garden all through those plants. That's how I got started.
Mm-hmm.
Martha, and then Kathy.
I had a couple of things, and I was thinking of those same programs that Jim mentioned. Those are some that my husband and I participated in before we had kids. So I agree, and I remember at least one of them we attended that it was a fairly large group that was there, and we ordered plants as well. And I don't know, maybe even just a plant sale at the nature center some different times of the year might be something that could fit somewhere on the recommendations. But I also think with the programming, looking at the age ranges and some of those family programming, because I know when I've looked more recently, as our kids were littler, the spacing, one of the kids could do it, but the other one couldn't. And, some of the family programs then had cutoffs for really young kids. And I understand some of that. But I think having things available that can take any age ranges, that, even those rain gardens, there are things even young kids can do playing in the dirt or whatever that makes it easier for families to participate. And then the last thing was kind of along the lines of, I forget now who said it about the overlap, but I feel like there are some environmental education pieces in some of the other categories that we've talked about, just as far as having kits for rental and things like that, that those connect to the environmental education as well.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, did I make up that you were going to say something, or did I just hear you?
No, you didn't make it up.
Okay, thank you. Because there we go.
I think we're onto something, because I know other places do rain gardens now, but we were the actually rain garden capital of the metro area for quite some time. And now we're known for both rain gardens and pollinator gardens. So I think that's something we could actually think about, a major focal point, and building around it, and actually possibly taking it to other communities, as in selling your information. Because people drive by my yard, and my yard's no show place. The best place in the yard is the rain garden, which as a byproduct has become a pollinator garden. And I've had people stop and say, that's a lovely garden. How did you get that? So I get to say, well, I'm lucky. I live in the city of Maplewood, and we do rain gardens and we do road projects. But so I think there's a place, and I think it's growing. So I think that might be, doesn't have to be the only one, but that could certainly become something we are well known for. And there's background in it. And I can't remember who said it. Was it Liz? I can't remember. Anyway, about the programming with age ranges of kids. I'm thinking that was done at the nature center mainly because then they could focus on the activities that were specific to an age group. But if we're talking about expansion and marketing, certainly that's where volunteers come in, where you could have a naturalist or some kind of an education specialist anyway with nature programs doing the overall presentation, then breaking into some kind of groups where you have, nature center volunteers that work with different age groups of kids. I think that's doable. It's just something we haven't needed to do in the past. Now we need to.
Really quickly, Audra, Jim, Jan is what I've got.
Yeah, Kathy, that was a perfect segue, because I was going to go back to your point about community ed and looking at, we've put it in the short term, and I'm just wondering if maybe, again, I believe it was Marge who mentioned just the overlap with partnerships and things, because these are all great ideas, but the likelihood is we're going to have to find partners to help us with implementing these things. So I'm wondering if under community ed, instead of, can you scroll up? Sorry, Mike.
Yep. Sorry. The formatting was bugging me, so I'm trying to get it.
Gotcha. With the connection to community exposure and saying this is what we have, maybe for the short term for community ed would be connecting with them to find out, as someone's mentioned in previous meetings, what the gaps are in the programming that they would be interested in partnering with us on. What kind of adult or child and family programs, and kind of exploring that. So when we go forward with these partnerships, we have, okay, this is what community ed told us they're looking for. This is what they want in the community. And that might be, again, part of our saying, this is what we would have to offer. And would you like to join us with this? But I don't know that we have anything to advertise to them in the next 6 months potentially, but does that make sense?
I wrote it down, so it makes sense to me.
Okay.
Um,
And then maybe more in the medium, like later on would be like Kathy said, that really just try to cross, advertise, maybe even explore possibilities of joint brochures that we haven't ever ventured into like some other cities do and that kind of thing. But maybe for the short term, just connecting with them just to see what they might want offered so we get some support.
And Mike,
yes.
this is Kathy. And I know there are some smaller communities that they don't do some of these things in their community because they just don't have the ability. So we have a limited ability at this point, but we have a lot more than they do in the knowledge base. And so I'm thinking about Little Canada. I mean, some people from Little Canada are some of the people that have stopped and said, "Boy, that's a lovely garden. What is it?" So I think there are places for what we've already done and what we have the knowledge base for to be spread. We just need to get our heads going on how to do it. Share it.
Okay, Jim. No, Jim, and then Jan, and then I'm going to go to the chat box to share some things.
Okay. Continuing on with the rain gardens. I don't remember which community it was. It was either Egan, Apple Valley, or Burnsville, but they actually put together a series of brochures that they were giving to people who moved into the city on establishing rain gardens and what those things were as part of kind of a welcome kit. But they were also, this was a couple years ago, selling their expertise to people, saying, if you want one of these, get in contact with whoever it was in the city and we'll see if we can do something with you. We'll pay for the cost of the plants if you put in the garden, type of thing.
Good. Thank you. Jan, go ahead. You're muted, so you can unmute and then we'll hear from you.
Okay, I just wanted to reflect on what a lot of the good comments that people have made. First of all, Jim, that was Egan that had that program. They had a very environmentally oriented public works director who's really incredible, and they got some grants for some major rain gardens. In terms of strengths for the nature center, in addition to the rain garden and natural areas kind of piece, the strengths were preschool and up through second grade, really for the schools. Those were the size of the nature center, and the kinds of programs that we did were very focused and were very really well received for those age levels. However, I did want to mention fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, mostly fourth and fifth grade, we did this fur trade program. That was incredible. Lots of volunteers, lots of staff, and that is a pretty unique program where we had 3 stations, and the kids would come out 2 or 3, usually 3 classes a day. So that was where we made our size of the nature center work with our two program rooms and outdoors. We had an outdoor station as well, which was really, really popular. We did that for 2 weeks every winter for about probably 12 years. So, and lots and lots and lots of materials that we have in storage for that, as well as our former fur trader, Jim, who passed away a couple of years ago, his entire collection of artifacts, fur trade artifacts. So that's a really super strong area. In terms of family programs, I really agree with the idea of having more generalized family program, and I tried to promote that idea. I thought a family night on Friday nights would be just really super well received. But frankly, people were exhausted by the end of the week. So I think if that kind of a program was a priority and energy was put into that kind of a thing, and not try and do everything else, that might, work really well and bring in a lot of people. We mentioned birthday parties before. Birthday parties were really popular. We started the birthday parties with nature centers many years ago. Community ed has a really strict calendar, and it's 6 months, 4 months, 2 months. It's just really weird. Even though we had a half-time secretary, it just seemed like we could never quite match up with their times. So that would be, I think, a challenge to do unless you had speakers and programs set up way in advance.
Yep.
Of course, those programs could be given every year. The rain garden programs, the native plant programs, they could be given every year. So that would be another area that would be really good to develop. I was the one who pretty much developed the native plant program, the classes and the plant sales, and there's probably, I don't know, 10 PowerPoints already prepared, many of which I worked on, that were well received. We had as many as 90 people in one of those sessions. We did it for 7 years. Now, I will say though that plant sales there's other competition for plant sales. There's a huge plant sale that obviously you probably know about, the Friends plant sale, but there's also one that I believe it's the Master Gardeners that do in June. And so there could be a plant sale with a program, sure. Yeah, it's just that we felt that we had kind of spurred that on, and then it kind of grew out and grew out of the community. But it could still be looked at. It's a huge energy to put on those kinds of programs. Anyway, I guess those are my comments, just to reflect on my own experience.
Thank you, Janet. Appreciate that. I wanted to go to the chat room before I go to Kathy, who raised her hand again. Joe Sheeran commented that while we're talking about education, adult and child, we should use this programming to incorporate elements of the city's soon-to-be-announced climate adaptation plan. For folks who are curious, the Environmental Natural Resources Commission has been working on a climate adaptation plan. Martha commented related to rain gardens, we could potentially offer tours of rain and pollinator gardens. We could either make them paid or make them as promotional opportunities. Liz commented that I like the idea of focusing on native plants, as that seems to be of interest to most Maplewood residents I speak to. Martha mentioned maybe there's an opportunity to engage a more diverse group of community with different gardening options and styles, connecting with community gardens maybe. It's an interesting connection to diversity and inclusion work in the community. And then maybe there's another connection to be made with environmental education in connection with the spring tree sale Maplewood has. It fits with the idea of native plants and might be of interest to people wanting to learn about trees and tree care before purchasing. And then Marcy commented while I was talking, and so I messed up my sequence there, so I'm good. ECFE programs, early childhood family education programs, are operated out of community ed departments, and some meet in early evenings. Family nights targeted to different community ECFE programs might be just the ticket. So a lot there to process and to digest. I appreciate folks. Kathy, then Jan.
Okay, well, with the whole native plant thing, based on partially what Jan said, and I do know that there are several of those sales, we could spare ourselves, how in the heck are you going to do a plant sale, and look at a calendar of when they normally occur. And that's just, a certain number of weeks, months before that is when you offer your program. So that you generate the enthusiasm and people go, oh, and then the plant sales will, of course, benefit from it, but you will benefit as well because you're offering the initial thought and how to go about. So we might be able to do something quicker and cheaper without having to do the actual plant sale ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But
thank you. Jan, go ahead.
So one of our staff, Oakley, she did ECFE programs for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. So there's a whole bunch of ECFE programs in the file. So that was a collaborative thing that we've done with community ed for years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard in the short run without those staff there to sort of deliver. And so I just want to remind folks that we don't have naturalists on site to deliver them in the short term. So whatever we create has to be ready for a successful launch, kind of long term. Martha just commented regarding sales. It's really nice to be able to order right when you're in season. You probably get more participation that way. Fewer people might purchase if they have to remember and think through it all again later. There's some
In the
yep.
session is what I meant. Sorry,
Oh.
not during the season, but like when you're actually there and you hear about them and they tell you about which plants are good for different areas, to be able to, think about it and order, take home an order form or do it right then. I feel like maybe that's just my style. If I'm doing it months later, I'm less likely to buy the plants.
Got it. Thank you. It does say session, not season. Jim, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Well, taking off what Martha had said and a couple other things. There's a company up in northern suburbs, Prairie Restoration, that does programs but also sells native plants. And perhaps there's one of our first partnerships is go to them and see if they're willing to put on a program on native plants, and then they can take the orders right there because they can supply the plant materials at a later date. I know there's a couple other companies, but the one I've worked with the most is Prairie Restoration.
There's a Landscape Alternatives in Roseville, I believe, too.
Yeah, that's the other one. But one of those two. But the other thing is Mike, you mentioned we don't have staff. Well, one of the things I think we should put on as a recommendation is the Friends group and some other volunteers like Jan Heyman and others found some foundations that have grants for people like naturalists and volunteer coordinators. And I think we should consider submitting proposals to them and seeing if we can get them to pay for a staff or a half-time naturalist and a part-time volunteer coordinator.
I'm going to add that to the financial investment capital operations is
wherever.
I'm going to write pursue because it's.
But I have the information on them for us if you need it.
Good. Appreciate that. I don't see anybody else with their hand raised, waving feverishly to go in there. Martha, and then Joe.
I was in the middle of typing something. I figured since no one else was talking, I'd just say it. But I wonder maybe another long-term goal, and I don't know which category this actually would fit in, but maybe there would be interest in related to the rain gardens and pollinator gardens, if there were sort of pre-made plans that people could purchase the plan or purchase some hours where someone would come out and advise them in their direct situation, so similar to a class but with maybe a little more personalization. And I don't know exactly how the cost benefit of that would work. Just a thought, maybe as a long-term goal, some other options that would fit with that.
I think I understand what you mean. I put it in the business model piece as a long-term thing. It's almost like a playbook. You would say, hey, here's your backyard. Here are the things that we would recommend you put. Here's where we would recommend you put them. Is that kind of what you're describing?
Yeah, I think so. Just, along the lines of hiring, a landscape architect, but instead of a landscape architect, maybe it's something through the nature center, through the city. If we are going to recommend, sort of specializing in that type of thing.
I wrote landscape architect light in the description because I think that it sort of describes that will help us all remember what that means. Marge, you have your hand raised, and then I'm going to go to Joe Sheeran.
Sure. I had a couple things, and I did have chats in there, but they were so far back. Mike,
I'm sorry, Marge.
So I will just mention them. One was an idea about using your cable TV station to have naturalist programs or whatever, and on a regular basis, the monthly talk or the weekly talk. That was one. The second one was on community ed. So I do teaching with South Washington County, well, all of Washington County schools. And we've been having some issues with cancellations due to low enrollments. And I think the thought is so many people are working to, dual family income, whatever, they don't have the capacity maybe to go to classes. So they've been canceling a lot at the last minute. So it's very frustrating because you do all that work to prep and then the week before it gets canceled. And then the last one was master gardening in Washington County. We actually offer a landscape class, like a 3-week class. Maybe Ramsey County also does the same thing. And that's, free. So there you go. Three suggestions. Thank you.
Joe Sheeran, you have a comment in the box about we already have a relationship with Tree Trust for the fall tree sale. Can we expand that? And then I also want you to respond to Marge's comment because Joe happens to be our communications director for the city. So he helps coordinate cable TV and programming and those kinds of things. So Joe, will you want to share a couple of your comments?
Yeah, sure. 2 things. One, I made a typo. It should have said spring tree sale.
Yeah.
But what got my interest on that one was we were talking about a plant sale, and I know we've had a lot of success like this year because of the success we had the first year in 2019. The 2020 tree sale, within 3 days we were sold out of our 150 trees. So there's interest there, and so my feeling was, in addition to just selling trees, do we want to use that again as an opportunity to talk about, the importance of trees, native species, inform people about emerald ash borer. Audra Robbins got a phone call this week from Care 11, and they thought we were clear cutting our trees for some reason. They didn't realize what emerald ash, the reporter didn't realize what emerald ash borer was. So I think that's an important thing. To Marge's point, I will tell you that back in the fall 2020, or in the spring of 2020, March, April, May, we did a series called 5 Things, and we ran it on social media. And basically 5 things was 5 things you need to know about the salamanders we have in our nature center, 5 things about turtles that are in our natural landscape. So we did about 4 or 5 sort of 5 things series that ran where Ann Hutchinson would kind of give 5 things about that particular wildlife that was native to, in most cases, Maplewood. It was pretty successful. The tough thing about the cable channel is Comcast doesn't give us ratings. So we don't know how many people are tuned into cable. I can tell you that when we started running those on social media, mainly Facebook and Twitter, the numbers did jump. We saw a significant rise in the numbers, and we tried to do is market it to parents who were trying to homeschool. In fact, I was trying to send it to folks in my son's class up here in White Bear, and I was trying to encourage as many folks as possible. And through those networks, through those teacher networks, we were able to help expand that. So that is a good idea, especially with Carol back in the fold. It would be nice to pick that up again. That's something that's doable from the communication standpoint almost immediately.
Yeah, and Joe, I'll add to the Tree Trust. I can explore a little further, but I know, again, they're focused on urban forestry and trees, but they also, we had the opportunity to add some information, and as volunteers were there at the tree sale to talk about the best way to plant a tree and that kind of thing. So that's something we could look at adding. It all depends what they have for volunteers and people at the time. And they do have a school program that you can apply for. It's funded through grants, but they basically make your school an environmental classroom if you apply and you want them to come out, and they do whole programs. So they're really tied to the schools for elementary and middle schools for their programs, but there might be some kind of tie in there. So we could always contact Karen, and I could see a little bit more about that.
Good. Thank you. I've just, Marcy put forward, there was a grant, Tamarack received a $500,000 grant from the Institute for Museum and Library Services. It's a once-a-year thing, so there's a link to that, so that, appreciate that. Martha was going to mention the same thing, virtual programming for some of those adult programs might be more accessible. They should translate fairly well with PowerPoints already created. So there's an opportunity to maybe do some things in the short run. I do want to go over to the recommendations piece because one of the pieces that we haven't talked about is volunteer coordination. And so I think what we recognize is the environmental education piece is really important, and it's also largely connected to partners. And so we'll continue to make sure that those stay linked. But in terms of volunteer coordination, there's a well-established network of volunteers that work at the Nature Center. And March shared with me some questions, sort of short-term recruit, writing a grant to fund a volunteer coordination position. If you could find an effective unpaid part-time volunteer manager. I was an unpaid volunteer manager at a nonprofit. People are out there. Add this to the volunteer coordination list. The other one is to recruit skill-based volunteers to help reopen the center. Someone to help with grant writing, a person to manage other volunteers, volunteer staff at the front desk during open hours, etc. Volunteers are all over. They're not easy to find, but the retirement community is filled with them. Speaking for myself now, we want to use the skills we developed over our long careers. 3M has great volunteer retiree staff that goes out twice a month. And then also recruit volunteers to work in 2021 on the second tier action-oriented task force to investigate each recommendation in our proposal. So Marge, you want to share any other thoughts? I appreciate you bringing those forward.
No, I just think I find it interesting, and I was speaking for Oakdale as well. It seems like, and I have a lot of experience with nonprofits, and there are so many volunteers out there that have skills, really strong skills. And I'm not sure that government organizations either utilize that or maximize that. I think there's great opportunities in it. As Jim just said, the Friends group right there. I mean, you can pull in so many people. And the hard thing is to manage all that. So you really have to have a strong manager, volunteer coordinator or manager position. So I think it's doable, and I think that would be a great way to try to get it started again. So, short term. So
I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing that. Speaking as a government person, we're always afraid of risk. And so always it's around risk mitigation for folks. So we always, as an HR person, I always worry about staff, making sure that they're safe and healthy. And so every time you add in new bodies to a facility, it's in my head, I always think of all of the risks that go with it. So it's not that we don't love our volunteers, I just always worry about them. And so that's just a little bit of perspective.
can I ask a question about that?
Sure. Yeah.
So is there not like liability insurance coverage for volunteers, like as part of your overall insurance plan that would cover, an accident walking on the trail or something?
There is, much of it is self-funded. So it carries there's a
Okay, sure.
pretty significant deductible for a lot of things for us. So
All right.
it's not a good excuse, but it is a rationale for why it doesn't sometimes work as smoothly as you think it might.
Okay. All right.
So,
Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not saying it's the best answer, but it's the answer we have. So we've got volunteer coordination and support. Other thoughts around what recommendations we could have related to volunteer coordination, either short, medium, or long term? Audra, do you want to weigh in? Because you often play this coordinator role in your job.
I agree with the comments that were made that having a central person coordinating all the moving parts is pretty essential to do it well. You can have the best intentioned volunteers, but they need guidance and structure and have to know what they're doing. And so you have to have someone that can lay out plans for, even when we have, the volunteer groups come out, a big part of the staff's work was just figuring out what the project is, what needs to be done, and kind of lay out the game plan and that. So having a centrally, whether it's a volunteer from the Friends group or however it pans out, having a dedicated 4-person, maybe 2, but 1 for sure, I think is key. And then whatever kind of software, I know right now, I know they have been using the Logistics or some kind of computer, whether it's spreadsheet, whatever your database, however you want to track and keep track of things, you just have to make sure you've got the tools to facilitate it and keep everybody organized and on track.
Others to recommendations, either short or long term. Martha shared in the comment box, I still think working with other groups in some type of partnership to manage volunteers might make a volunteer coordinator more feasible, so Maplewood doesn't have to fund it solo. I think that's an interesting one. Right, align our volunteer coordinator I can't spell all this one. So appreciate that. Others on this one? Jan, go ahead. You're still muted, so like.
Okay.
There we go. Yep.
So in terms of this idea of coordination with the East Metro, I think that's a wonderful idea to pursue. You know, whether it's a volunteer coordinator or it's a naturalist staff or programming, all of those kinds of things hopefully can be explored. I just want to mention that if this idea was pursued, there's the LCCMR grant might be a good vehicle for finding funding for that. Just like there was an LCCMR grant that many years ago, probably at least 25 years ago, probably when it was called LCMR, to get the residential learning centers coordinated, the ones that, you know, there's 12 or so around the state, and that's how they did it, through a grant. So that might be a good way to pursue that. It's a large grant, but it could be really lucrative. I did want to echo a little bit about what Audra said, and I think that a volunteer coordinator a volunteer coordinator who actually works with the volunteers at Maplewood Nature Center or at the preserves, it's best that they be on site to be able to coordinate tools and information and you know, access the building materials, you know, all of that. There's actually quite a bit of coordination that is involved in running a volunteer program. One of our staff, Oakley, she probably spent at least a quarter of her time just running the volunteer program. So it is a lot. The volunteers may be out there, but you have to be able to find them and nurture them and train them and sustain them to keep it going, is my opinion. Not to say that there isn't a role for an East Metro consortium. I think there is, but I think you still need somebody on site as well.
Okay. I appreciate that. Marge, you have your hand raised. Is that from the previous one? Okay. I'll lower that. Other folks that want to weigh in here, not saying there's kind of there's still a lot to deal with. So I'm not going to turn it off, but I am going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to ask Joe Sheeran if you can unmute and be ready to talk about the survey that we are doing citywide. Jim had an email this morning, which I appreciated. It was talking about how do we get input from different parts of the community, the big community, the broader community. And as you know, we every other year the city does essentially a resident satisfaction survey that includes, and you obviously got a chance to see it, includes a lot of information. It really sort of is a check in to make sure that we're delivering high quality services to our residents. We did have some specific questions to recreation and to nature center programming. By way of practice, the survey went out to a random sampling of residents. I think 2,500 to 3,000 direct mail surveys. And then there was an opportunity to do some online surveys. Joe has some information and can talk a little bit about it. Joe, are you ready?
Yeah, can you guys hear me? I'm off of mute, right?
Yep, you're good.
I have a different screen up. Yeah, so overall, what they did is they asked about a wide variety of city issues, if anyone saw it, and they asked about park and recreation a couple of times, and we asked obviously specifically about this issue we're working on now. One of the, and I'll just kind of go down some, and these are preliminary numbers. So far, we have results from about 300 people who took the survey. We're hoping more took it. The other part of the survey was you had an option to either take it digitally or an option to take it manually, and they were going to tabulate the numbers. We're going to get the final analysis December 15th. The good thing about the final analysis is they benchmark everything. So what they'll do is, obviously, people always complain about the value of taxes, and that's always low. But the good part about that is they benchmark it to other communities. So even though everyone's going to say their value for taxes is lower than it should be, so what you want to see is where, when it comes to park and rec issues, where our benchmark is compared to the rest of the folks across the country. The survey, they asked thousands of communities across the country, so they have a good set of data that they're comparing to. So overall, one of the questions here is overall quality of the natural environment, how they feel about it. 67% say good, 18% say excellent. So we only have 15% that rate it fair to poor. So overall, people are, overall quality of parks and recreational opportunities. Roughly 20% say excellent, 60% say good, 8% say fair, 10% say poor. So again, we're doing well in that one. And then they also ask sort of related questions around overall health and wellness opportunities in Maplewood, which again stretches into a number of things, which includes park and rec. And then another example is opportunities for education, culture, and the arts, which again talks about what we're talking about here tonight. Again, these are preliminary numbers. What they go in to do is they lump together similar, when I say they, the survey company lumps together similar types of background and similar types of questions, and they give you sort of a more robust analysis other than that one question. They look for trends, they look for detail in the data. Give me 1 second to get down to the bottom of the survey. The one thing I don't like about this particular survey company is they don't necessarily make it user friendly for the end user. So we'll see when we get it, we'll probably tweak it a little bit to make it much more user friendly. This particular question that we're trying to get at tonight is about a 50-50 when I looked at this earlier. So this is the way we ask the question for folks who didn't read the survey. Question: currently, recreational programs, sports leagues and classes, and nature center educational events are paid for partially from the city's general fund and partially from participation fees. Participant attendee fees cover about 50% for recreational programs. Participant fees cover about 10% for nature center events. So the question then asks, going forward, how do you think the city should pay for these programs? The first response was keep the current funding system, which could increase property taxes. 33% said yes, let's keep that system. Option B, increase participant fees. 26% roughly said that. And then C was 33%, create cost sharing partnerships. And then the last question we said is completely outsource privatized recreation and nature center events, 8%. So again, the survey shows there's some appetite for some combination of keeping a system for funding in place and mainly cost sharing. So That's what we have. Again, these are preliminary numbers. We're going to have to see, you know, if we sent the survey out to more than 2,000 people, these are only, you know, responses from about 300. So it depends. The other thing about this survey too is it tends to oversample white populations, and it tends to oversample populations over 65. So I'd want to see more. Again, these are raw numbers. I'd want to see more raw analysis before reading anything into this.
Thanks, Joe.
So thanks, Joe. So I guess the question for the group is, and this is probably a 3-part question, so I apologize for making this more complicated than it needs to be. The next city council meeting is December 14th. It's the last meeting of the calendar year. The information that we would get from the survey comes the day after on the 15th. So right, of course it does. So the question is, how important is the information from the full survey to this group? How would you use the information to either affirm or change your recommendations? And do you want to make a presentation to the city council before or after the data? And how do people feel strongly, not strongly? I'm going to defer to the wisdom of the group, but would appreciate some perspective and dialogue, and just know that I'm indifferent to the answer. I just want to make sure that there's good, robust discussion. So I will turn it over to the group to weigh in. Martha, you popped off the screen. Do you want to go first?
I was just gonna say the first thing that popped into my mind, and I don't know whether or not it's possible, but I was thinking about, you know, we had some recommendations about the building use and getting that started right away, like, you know, short-term goal starting right away in January, and wondering if there's a way to provide some just super basic short-term goal recommendations like that one at this next meeting, and a more robust set of recommendations at a future meeting.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Who else would like to weigh in with their thoughts? Jim, you've changed view. Does that mean you want to chat? Your camera moved on me, so you're muted. I can't hear you.
Had a little trouble with the cord wrapped around my foot, and I pulled the power cord out.
Got it. Well, it sounds good. Marge, you're unmuted. Does that you want to weigh in? Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. If we want to do something yet in January, we need to proceed with something. And I totally support Martha's suggestion to just go with even a couple, 1, 2, 3 recommendations. And then that data that's going to come from that survey, it doesn't sound like it's going to really inform a lot. I mean, I think will help with the next step, but for us to refine our recommendations, I'm not sure that, you know, they're going to go or not going to go. That information, the data that comes through from that will, I think, help the short term, you know, into the next 6 months.
Okay.
That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Liz?
You know, I agree that the sooner we act, the better. Do we have those immediate short-term recommendations ready to give at the next meeting? I mean, is that what we should be focusing on now, is trying to figure out what are those 1, 2, 3 easy things we can tell the council that we think should be done immediately in January, or are we not ready for that yet? I just don't want to get to a point where we make suggestions but don't have any way to follow through on it, so we maybe lose a little credibility in front of the council. But I would love to be able to give those recommendations immediately, because the sooner we can get it up and running, you know, the better, obviously, for all of our citizens of Maplewood and ourselves.
Okay. The short answer is we probably couldn't say 1, 2, 3 right now. I think we could probably get there within maybe 30 minutes more time, or just an email exchanges kind of back and forth. I have Becca, and then I have Jim, and then I have Audra.
So I'm all for trying to get this nature center, getting the nature center open as soon as possible, but I'm wondering, this is also kind of continuing on with what Liz was saying, what is actually feasible in the short term? We can say we want to recommend getting the nature centers open as soon as possible, but who's going to be that body in the building? And, what exactly can we accomplish in the short term?
Okay. Boy, I lost track. I think I said Jim, Audra, Kathy. No.
Yeah, at this point, I would not feel comfortable presenting this to the city council. I don't think we've done enough prioritizing. I think particularly if we want to have the center open on January 1st, which is what we said, I think we need to look at that date and maybe change that. I would like to present something to the city council that said, we're going to propose opening the nature center on X date, and this is the manner in which we're going to do it.
Okay.
Whether that's Carol Gurnis being there part-time, or that's volunteers opening it and manning the building. That's kind of where I would come from. On that point, I've gotten several responses on the Friends of Maplewood Nature Center internet site, asking why isn't the building open for people who have kids to use the restrooms. And so there's, that was, I think I had 8 responses, and 7 of them were related to having some place to warm up or use the restrooms in the building.
Thank you. Audra, and then Kathy.
Sure. And Jim, I'll go ahead from what I was going to say to answer that. The short answer is lack of staff and COVID restrictions, because if we open that building to the public, I mean, we aren't even opening the Wakefield Community Building at this point, and it looks like, even though we have that exterior bathroom, for the reason of the rink and having that bathroom with the automatic locks at Wakefield, that is not open. We have put satellites out now and at all the warming houses in anticipation of not being able to use the warming houses right away. We have satellite restrooms out there for that reason, because if you open the building and you have bathrooms, then there have to be staff there that are sanitizing them and following the protocols. And there's more of that risk just because and COVID cases have risen. This is, I mean, Mike, you maybe know more of the actual statistics, but what I've heard is these next few weeks are going to be even tougher. And so that, even if we had staff, I don't know that building would be open to the public because of COVID-19. So that's what I was going to say too about getting hung up on the date. And I was joking, but that right away is 1st of January, especially with COVID, we're looking at, just for perspective, the warming houses, there's a tentative date now of opening January 4th, that Monday. But I mean, all the communities that are kind of watching things are going to be surprised if that even happens. So I don't know, again, that rush to open the building, as someone said, what would be our purpose just to say it's open, but what would we be doing and what would be the purpose of it, and how would we manage that whole COVID risk management plan and all those protocols. So if there ever was a time to have a little leeway, it's now, just because of, unfortunately, the situation the pandemic is in right now. So that's just all I wanted to add.
I'm not arguing with you, Audra.
No,
I understand fully. I mean, my background is environment, health, and safety, and I understand completely. It's just, I'm just giving you the input that I'm getting.
Yep.
And we do have a ADA accessible satellite right there by the parking lot. It's not ideal, but there are restroom facilities, and we did not bring those in October like we normally do. And there is an ADA accessible satellite on the property. So if someone does have a bathroom emergency, it is there. Like I said, not ideal at all, but.
Thank you. It's good feedback too, also, Jim, that you're getting interactions with folks through your website. I have Kathy Judeman, and then I don't have anybody else in the queue. So go ahead, Kathy.
Okay. Well, Audra took my answer. The answer to those people is COVID. Nothing is normal. Nothing is accessible. Even if we had staff right now, that building could not be open. In response to the question about shouldn't you have a couple of or 3 recommendations right now to give us, and my answer is not necessarily, for 2 reasons. I did give an update at the last council meeting, and I told them what this group was working on and how hard you were working and what the immediate goals were. And number 1 was to get the building accessible as soon as possible. So the council is aware. But again, we're also aware, and we are very concerned about the whole COVID piece. That all city operations are affected by that. So the Nature Center is no worse off or better off than anybody else from that standpoint. And I guess I'm kind of with Jim. If you give us a couple right now, I don't think it'll mean that much. And in my reaction is, it sounds like ready, fire, aim. Here's some, but we're not done. I think I speak for everybody when we'd rather have them thought out and realistic and what you really want to see done, and we will try and move forward. Everybody's enthused. They were understanding about needing some patience. They were all in agreement that we probably need another meeting based on what I said to them, and they appreciate it, and they just want realistic things that can be done in any certain time frame, but that no matter what time frame this group presents to us as a council, the overriding factor in when anything gets started is COVID. And so we know that. And we also know that people we want the Nature Center open. We hear that from people. So it's not that it's not in our heads. So I just think, I gave them some examples of what you've come up with 6 and 18 months and so on. And they were impressed with that. A lot of these things sound doable and have some long-term vision. So I think you're on a good path, and I think they're waiting, but we're patient enough to know that it's got to happen in good time. And that if COVID hadn't struck, a whole lot of things would be done sooner. But from my standing as a city council member, I also want you to know that I think my colleagues, even more than I, will want to know the results of the citizen survey to give some reinforcement to what you are recommending, because we're serving an entire community. And so I think they're going to want that, even if it doesn't turn out to be anything in our minds as a group here significant. As a council, we're going to want to know what people had to say about that, some indicator of where it falls in their priority list and what they're missing and that type of thing. So I think they're going to want that input, just so you know where I think we're coming from. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Liz, you popped up on the screen. Go ahead.
Is this at the point where we maybe do a, plan A, B, C type situation, like a lot of the, school districts are doing, and my company, for instance, is doing, where it's, if it doesn't look like, February 15th is really going to be the end of this emergency order, and we continue with some COVID protocols, but we want to get as much of the Nature Center open as possible. It might not be the building, it might be more of the outdoor stuff, where we have to kind of realign some of the want and wish lists that we put together, where maybe we need to ditch the building for now and look at how do we get more people out there and get the outdoors more accessible this winter and spring. And then hopefully as the summer comes on, we can look at opening the building. That's just kind of my thought. You get a lot of the districts who are doing similar types of plans, and I know it's a lot of work to do that, but at least we have a couple different avenues to go depending on how the pandemic pans out here in the future.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I will just say, I don't think it's that difficult to put together kind of a tiered opening, either some sort of protocol or some sort of guidelines. I'm looking at Audra, you're nodding. I think we could probably figure that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then Kathy, was that you that said my name?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Basically what you just, I think what the path you're on and the kind of outline framework you've been using is really effective, and I think the council will appreciate it. But I think like you said, you can come up with something that will address that, because it's going to have to be done for parks as well. And so I think that alternative will just be in our heads as well as in front of us when you come forward.
So I want to circle back to Martha and March, because we've now had a couple of different thoughts and perspectives. What are your kind of thoughts about the dialogue? Because you put forward sort of having a like here's some really quick hit 1, 2, 3 things that we would want, and then a deeper recommendation. What's been your reaction to the dialogue since then? Martha, then March.
I think it makes sense. My initial reason for suggesting that was just thinking about the document that we had created, and that we had that January 1st recommendation on there. And honestly, I don't know how it happens, but thinking about the building not being able to open because of COVID didn't even cross my mind when I mentioned that. So I think the conversation and the way things have gone since then makes a lot of sense.
Thank you.
And sorry, I just,
yeah.
I think Liz's comment about having, some different versions of the plan, and maybe like Kathy said, we just keep the same format that we have, but maybe there's some indicators that we could have as within those, as far as, which ones would fit with, a partial model due to COVID, or which ones would fit with, a full open model.
Thank you. March, go ahead.
Sure. Part of my thought was, when we first started this way back in whenever, August, July, I don't remember. I thought our goal was to have recommendations by year end. So I pretty much felt like there was already some assumption that we were going to be ready and done with something to give them. And I really appreciated though Kathy's input on council they're going to want the data. They're going to want, the full recommendation. So I'm fine with waiting. And the COVID thing, yes, I mean, that makes total sense. Last meeting, I thought we talked about having staff there part-time, but if that can't happen with the governor's changes, then yes, that takes over everything. So I'm fine with waiting then. Thank you.
Thank you. Audra and I chatted with Melinda too about, what would potentially staffing the building look like. So we've had conversations internally. So I don't think it's Audra, do you want to weigh in and kind of, it's possible. It's included. It's actually, honest, once things are sort of, once the numbers drop, it's probable at this point. Part of the challenge is going to be which hours, what days, those kinds of practical things that we'll have to figure out what's the best approach. But from a standpoint of once the restrictions are lifted, we are confident that we can open it a certain number of hours and have staff present there, because I think the group is right. There's value in having activity and some vibrancy in the area, and we get that, and we'll figure out a way to make that happen. Because I am the schedule keeper, it is 6:36. I also know the city council calendar for the month of January, because it's also my job. And so one of the practical realities is the next city council meeting in 2021 is the 11th of January. The next meeting after that is the 25th. And so from a practical standpoint, if the city council is going to want to look at the survey data, and it comes on the 15th, their first chance to talk about it is January 11th. And that would mean that would push us back to the meeting on January 25th for a council presentation with recommendations. It's a month later than we had anticipated. Maybe 5 weeks later than we had anticipated. But I don't know that there's an alternative beyond that. I look to maybe the city manager or Kathy Juneman to kind of weigh in. Is my thinking correct that the best opportunity to present would be January 25th?
Mike, I would probably say that might be best, because on the 11th we'll be swearing in 2 new council members. And there is some other more different kinds of work that might be a little difficult for the first council. So we might let them get their feet planted a little bit before we bring them this plan. I'm not saying that we can't have it on the 11th, but I think it might be easier for everybody if we waited till the 25th.
I would prefer the 25th because, basically, for what Melinda said, plus with 2 new members, we want this presentation to be educational to them. They have not been going along this route with us as the 2 people who are leaving have been. So we want the list of recommendations and how we came about them and all that to be very, very clear. And I think some of your passion needs to come through in the report. And so that can only be done if it's complete enough for them to get where we've been going all this time. And so we've gone over what hasn't been thrown off by the last 10 months of our lives. I just think to keep the value up and to properly educate the 2 new people, I think the 25th would be better, because we will have the chance on the 11th to discuss the whole survey and where it came from and all that type of thing, because that's something new to them as well. And we want them to know why it was done and how it was done and all those types of things. And then you come in with the punch of where we're going with this. That's my reaction anyway.
Strong objections to waiting until the 25th.
I support 25th.
Okay. Then Audra and I will figure out, I will write the staff report. Melinda, you raising your hand. Go ahead.
I don't think that we talked about this at all yet, but something to consider for the group before we close tonight would be to get input on who might like to be the presenters to the city council.
Oh, you took my thunder.
Sorry. I didn't want that to get away from us.
No, and I appreciate that. That was actually next question on the list was going to be,
okay,
we have a date. We have time now to refine the recommendations and all the typos and the formatting kind of challenges. Maybe the 2 questions that I had remaining are who speaks, and then do we want to meet in that time period between now and the 25th to really refine and prioritize? Marge, I see you nodding your head. Do you want to be the presenter or do you want to be the refiner?
All the same.
Totally. I think we need to have the meeting to refine.
Yes. Okay.
This seems like a no-brainer. And then I would be glad to participate and speak, and I would be comfortable with that, but should it come from one of us versus the staff? Is it better to have a staff person? Is it better to have a team member? Yes, team member. You could, I think it could be shared, and the more of us that show up, I'm guessing, the better. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess I would say that we would like staff background, so that'll be probably Mike. And then however many of you we come up with. Normally what we do is possibly 2 or 3 speak, but however many want to be there to show that you're interested is wonderful. Right. Whether it's, I don't know if you'll be there, or we'll be here, but whatever. But I do think we should probably refine it down to 2 or 3 who actually speak. And it's just my belief that we should probably look for some, I don't know, topics around which the speakers would decide. I mean, should we have somebody, probably somebody about the volunteer friends type thing. And then we should probably have somebody about, I don't know if I want to say nature centers in general or the whole collaborative thing for sure. And then I would certainly like one of you who has a family and has participated in that's the reason you got on this committee, to be one of the presenters. I think we need a cross section of presenters so that the full council can get the feel of all the people that were interested in this and put your energy into this. That's just as a council member.
That's why you're on the task force, because you offer a good perspective of the people that we're trying to influence. I lost track of orders, so I will go Liz and then Becca, because you both popped up on my screen, and then Jim. Your hand is up. I don't know if I missed that or if you're in the queue. But no. I'll go Liz first, then Becca.
I do agree with the councilwoman that we need to have a cross section. I am more than happy to volunteer, but quite frankly, my nominations, the two folks that I think would be very well are Jim and Martha, to be quite frank. I think that they have both, and I mean, you know, Marge, of course, you too as well, but I think Jim has a really great perspective being part of the Friends, and Martha has come up with so many of the ideas on our list, and her background and what her passion comes through and how she talks about this. I think those two would be a really great cross section of this group. But again, I know that some people don't like talking in front of groups, and that's what I do for a living. So I'm more than happy to represent, but I am also going to do some nominations.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. So if you are, because we'll all stare awkwardly at each other, if you are interested and willing, send me an email and I'll get the roster together. And then once we get the folks who are going to do it, and then we can divide up and break up and say, okay, you take section 1 and 2, you take section 3, you talk about process or however it works. Thank you. Becca.
Oh, I was just saying, in light of what Kathy was saying, that we should figure out what it is that we're going to say, and then whoever is best suited for that particular role section should be the one to bring that to the council.
So that is going to be agenda item number 2 at our next meeting. So we'll get the recommendations refined, and then it's okay, what are we going to say and why? And then we'll figure out who. So we'll make that as an agenda item for next time. And I think you're right. I mean, I think if we come up with 4 sections, we've got to find 4 people. If we come up with 2, we can do 2. It's sort of open.
Mike, this is Jim.
Go ahead, Jim.
I would be willing to do that. Unfortunately, right now I have a commitment on the 25th that evening that, depending upon how things go with COVID, I'm supposed to make a presentation to another group that I've promised them I would do. We postponed it already from March of this year to January of next year. So we'll have to see how that works. But if that doesn't go through, I would be happy to be one of the presenters.
We will add you to our COVID protocol roster, plan A, plan B, plan C. I appreciate that. Other thoughts?
Mike, are the city council meetings being done remotely as well?
They are, yeah. Okay. Yep. We've had 1 hybrid meeting since March. So we've gotten pretty good at it of getting people in, and Joe and his team in communications broadcast it and do good video and good visuals. So it actually works. Go figure.
Mike, this is Kathy. And just for anybody who knows me even halfway, if you've got me able to participate full bore, it's working. We are actually getting the business done. It's encouraging to me that we can keep moving like this. And look how well this group has done remotely. I mean, you've really made yourselves clear, and you've been enthused, and you've come up with great ideas. So I just think we're all learning, me in particular, how to make it happen. So, but be assured that we are listening and we are carrying on our business just about as well as we can.
I got a message from Joe Sheeran that says he'll help put the visuals together, so I already feel better. So that's good stuff. It's not going to look like a Word document. It's not going to be black and white, so it'll have some flair, I guess I'll say. Joe, do you want to weigh in anything else?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to it is, if anybody knows me, I keep stuff as simple as possible. So I don't like a lot of words on a screen, that kind of stuff. Let the presenter do the presenting, and it's a visual. What I will say is, depending on what direction you want to go, Kevin and I have a ton of video at the Nature Center. We have a ton of photos at the Nature Center. So if you like, a good example is, I think Marge was talking about doing a naturalist on cable. We could show a couple of seconds of clip from our naturalist. We don't have to show the full thing. We should show a couple of seconds just to give the rest of the council an idea where we want to go, and some visuals so they have a better idea.
That's a great idea.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. We're going to have to meet again.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's often difficult to do it on to try to get a dozen people to agree to their calendars while you're staring at a screen with each other. Thursdays have tended to be a good day for this team. I'll just say that Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve are probably out. I'm going to speculate that everyone will be busy. So that leaves us the 10th, the 17th, or January 7th. As potential Thursday late afternoon times. We can do it. Martha, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
I was just gonna vote for the 7th, just because it would be kind of a bridge in the gap between today and January 25th. I feel like if we meet again in December and prepare for something on the 25th, that's a long time in between.
Yep. And I'll add to that, just in case, I'm sure the survey results would come in on the 15th, like Joe said, but sometimes just if something came up, that way we'd be guaranteed that they'd been able to compile the survey results and have those together if we did the 7th.
I'd like to recommend we do the 7th and the 21st of January. 21st, just in case we need another meeting. So schedule one for the 7th and schedule tentatively for the 21st.
Dress rehearsal.
The 21st could perhaps be a run through of the presentation, or working out any kinks and tech.
I don't have a dog in the fight, so I'm happy to do whatever. It doesn't seem to be any wild objections. So I'll look at Audra on the screen and say, are you comfortable with the 7th? And then put a placeholder for the 21st for either the presenters or walkthrough.
I'm fine with that.
General head nodding and agreement.
Well, since I proposed it, I'm good for it.
I appreciate that. My last question, and this is selfish, but there's a lot of recommendations on this screen over to my right, and there's a lot of bullet points, and some of them say the same thing in 2 or 3 different ways. You have this. Is there any objection to my trying to edit into fewer bullet points that still say the same thing? And then I can send it out. I know it's more work for me, but Marcy gave me the thumbs up. So you have this, you can feel free to edit. Marge gave me a thumbs up. So you can edit it yourself, but I'm more than happy to take a crack. And then what I can do is obviously get that out to folks ahead of the meeting on the 7th. And ideally I'd get it out to you before the holiday season sort of kicks off in earnest. So
I think the copy we have is a PDF. I'm not sure we can edit it.
Oh,
not that I'm saying we need to, just so that you are aware that I don't believe we are able to.
okay. Tell you what, I'll send the Word doc anyways, and then I'll do the summarized version also in a Word doc just in case, because it's just easier to convert if it's in the original format. It's 6:53. We've made some really good progress today. We have some voluntold speakers. We've got a plan. We've got a date for a council presentation. We have all of the recommendations we have recommendations in each of the 6 categories. We have a finalized session on the 7th. We've got support from communications on making it look better. Yeah, this was a lot. I appreciate everybody's time and attention to this.
Mike?
Yes, Kathy.
Can I just take a couple minutes, because as the council member, I owe you people a lot. And I just want you to know that all of you have made so many contributions, and I have passed this on to the mayor a couple of different times and to the whole council at the last meeting. Thank you for all of your energy and all of your time. This is such an important topic. And it was such a terrible thing for us to have to do. And so now for you to put your energies into this to help us put it back on track and get it so sustainable, I can't thank you enough. I just want you to know how much I appreciate, as the rest of the council does, all your background and expertise and all your willingness to share. This has been wonderful. I've been doing this job for 19 years, oh my. And I have to say, this is the most positive energy I have ever experienced from a group of residents with a goal. So I really want to thank you for everything you put into this. It's amazing. And I can't wait for the meeting where you present to the council so they can get some of the feel for that. It has just been wonderful. And I know your energies have been already strained in 18 different directions by this COVID thing. So to give us this much of your time and energy, I just can't say enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And of course, it goes without saying that staff needs to be thanked too, because, they don't do anything else but these meetings, Thank you particularly to Audra, because she's doing, both, well, double duty here. And then Mike's been a really, I think, fabulous facilitator. So thank you for everything you've done, everyone. I will share this with the council as well, that I think this has just been an incredible piece of work. And your creativity and your time is most appreciated. So have a wonderful holiday season, and please know how much I appreciate you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Mike.
thank you. I'm not going to add anything after that. That was great. If you're interested in being a speaker, send me an email. Thank you so much. We're gonna
Happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
I appreciate it.
Happy holidays, everybody. Good night.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye.